The death penalty debate returns to Ohio. Welcome to Columbus on the Record. Capital punishment in Ohio has been dormant for several years, mainly because Ohio cannot get the drugs it needs to execute condemned inmates through lethal injection. A federal judge has also ruled the state's protocol causes severe pain and needless suffering. Ohio last executed an inmate in 2018. But now a new method has surfaced, nitrogen gas. Alabama used it last week to execute a convicted murderer. Alabama officials called it humane and effective. Critics called it cruel and experimental. Following that execution, Attorney General Dave Yost, two state reps, and the head of the Ohio Prosecutors Association called on lawmakers to pass a bill to allow Ohio to use nitrogen.
I support this bill, saying that the law of Ohio should be thwarted, be able to be thwarted, because pharmaceutical companies don't want to sell the chemicals, is an abdication of the sovereignty of the state of Ohio, which still has this law on its books.
Governor DeWine did not want to comment on that proposal, but he noted he is not sure the death penalty is a deterrent. Jesse Balmer, in his statement, the governor said there's just more important things to worry about right now than the death penalty in these bills. How big a priority is it for the legislature to add nitrogen to the protocol?
Yeah, so we had this press conference this week. You had two Republican lawmakers who were there. They have about 13 co-sponsors on this bill, but there's a lot of bills in the Ohio legislature. We've yet to hear whether this is a priority of the legislative leaders, either the Speaker or the Senate President. So I'm sure it'll get a debate, but this is still pretty early in the process.
Well, this execution did not go off perfectly smoothly. The witnesses say the inmate, Kenneth Eugene Smith, writhed on the table, was struggling against the restraints, seemed to be convulsing for 2 minutes, took 20 some odd minutes for him to die. Does that hurt the chances of adding nitrogen here in Ohio because it wasn't so-called peaceful?
Yeah, well, you're trying to kill someone. So, I mean, just the mere fact means it's not going to be pleasant. I think it could be a problem. But I think what the governor's getting at here, and which I believe, is that the deterrence factor that may have existed with capital punishment 30, 40, 50 years ago just isn't there. I mean, the time lags you now have, and I'm not saying it's unfair. I mean, everybody's got to have the legal process play itself out, but the time lag that's now involved is just so long. I just don't see how that is a deterrence. And then also, like the governor, I'm pro-life, and I think there's a basic problem there in that you can't really be pro-life on the abortion side of things and then turn around and say, yeah, I want to do capital punishment. And I think that is the kind of a battle that may be going on within the governor's head right now.
Desiree, in that news conference, the Attorney General and the state reps, they sort of detailed some really horrific crimes, folks who are on death row, what they had done. How much of a factor should, the peacefulness, so-called, of an execution be, and whether or not we restore it?
Well, I think there have been, when we look over history about how people have died, there have been 11 Ohioans who were later exonerated, right? And they were sentenced and had the death penalty. So I don't think, me personally, I don't believe in it. I don't think we should take life into our hands when we decide to kill people, because you never know what DNA evidence or anything may pop up later, just depending on how a lot of these court cases go, and sometimes people turn out to be innocent in the end. What we do know is that there have been a lot of feedback as to what happened in Alabama in terms of it being experimental and the struggle that gentleman faced holding his breath in order to avoid breathing and inhaling the nitrogen. I don't think that's something we should employ here in Ohio. Cruel and unusual punishment is written language in the Constitution for a reason.
And Jesse, there's some talk that the companies that provide the nitrogen may try to withhold the nitrogen from states that want to use it to execute inmates.
Yeah, I'm less familiar with that, but I know that has been a problem with the lethal injection drugs, and it's certainly a reason that Governor Mike DeWine cites for not proceeding with executions, the one execution method that we currently have, which is lethal injection. He says he just doesn't want to risk potentially losing access to those medications for other parts of state government, Medicaid, other uses, just for the death penalty.
I think Dave Yost said that they could produce nitrogen right there in that room, because apparently there's nitrogen in the air. I don't know how we go about doing that.
Yeah, it's in the air, but I mean, that doesn't mean it's all that easy to just pull it out and isolate it. I mean, I just think it's problematic in general. I mean, how you're trying to kill someone. So how can you do that humanely? I mean, that's always going to be the big factor in all this. There are people that say, let's go back to hanging or shooting because it happens immediately. Yeah. But come on, it's 2024.
Why do you think Governor DeWine has not, he's obviously has a lot of hesitancy at the very least on the death penalty.
And I think it's because of his, he hasn't talked to me about it, but if I had to guess, it's his pro-life belief.
So why not say I support abolishing the death penalty?
Because once again, he's causing a lot of chaos in the legislature, because he may be going against the majority of his fellow Republicans in both the House and the Senate. And I don't think he's right now wants to pick that battle over that issue.
Desiree, there is a bill in the legislature to abolish the death penalty. Does it have a chance? Is there any Republican support for that, which it would need?
Well, I believe there are some Republicans in Ohio who would support it. I think a majority of Ohioans would support it. The State House, however, is a very different story. They just overrode the governor's veto for the trans bill. And so we know that there is friction there. And so I could understand how the governor probably wouldn't want to pick that fight. But because we don't have fair maps and fair districts, the Republicans in the legislature have a lot of power.
Mike, I think that bill does have Republican co-sponsors. So I think it is a bipartisan bill to do away with the death penalty.
Does it have enough Republican support, though?
I will say there has been a growth in the number of Republicans who've supported abolishing the death penalty in the state of Ohio. And I think that could create a block that will be a problem for someone who's trying to implement a new method like this. But it really hasn't been enough people to eliminate the death penalty so far.
Yeah, we haven't talked about the death penalty on this show in quite a while. And I don't think Ohioans have really... Have they missed it, that we don't have the death penalty? Do they feel less safe because we haven't executed an inmate since 2018? How big a priority is it for voters at this point?
Crime's a big priority, but I think that form of deterrence is viewed as being not very effective, just because the time that the death penalty is imposed and the time that it actually happens is 25, 30 years sometimes.
And then you add in the exonerations that we have seen.
Correct.
They're still relatively rare, but they're not totally unheard of.
Right, and we hear all sorts of stories from all over the country about innocent men being exonerated decades later after spending so much time behind bars. And I think the reality is most Ohioans, like most Americans, once the police officers show up and that person is entered into the justice system, they forget about it, right? They're done with it. And so court cases are complicated and legislation is complicated. And so I don't think that the average Ohioan is pondering at home over at their kitchen table thinking about the death penalty.
All right. Saturday marks the one-year anniversary of the fiery, toxic train derailment in East Palestine. The Norfolk Southern derailment spilled toxic chemicals into the ground in nearby waterways. Authorities released vinyl chloride into the air to keep train cars from exploding. Thousands of people fled their homes. They have returned, but fears of contamination and long-term health effects remain. After the derailment, federal lawmakers moved quickly to file legislation aimed at improving rail safety. It has gone nowhere. Desiree Timms, these trains go by all the time now. You see them when you're waiting in traffic. You see them as you go over rail yards. There hasn't been another big derailment since then, but do you think Ohioans feel as safe now as they did a year ago?
No, I think it's still top of mind when we talk about East Palestine, especially because weeks later or days later, I believe there was another derailment albeit not as major as East Palestine and Springfield. And so people are paying attention to what's happening when these trains move through their neighborhoods. And so hopefully people will support and champion more regulation. But of course, these giant corporations own and operate a lot of these trains. And so they're still bringing in billions and billions of dollars in record profits. And so they have the lobbyists to go out there to make sure that they're not regulated and they can continue to do what they want.
Well, we see this time and time again. You see a major accident, major-ish incident, whether it be a school shooting, a train derailment, a plane crash, call for legislation. Legislation gets filed and then delay.
Yeah.
And oftentimes nothing happens.
Yeah, oftentimes. And what has happened since that, then, in 1 year, is you're right, we haven't had a major train derailment, but we actually have more train derailments now since then than we had previous. So the situation's only getting worse. I think we're lucky that the cargo that's being, transported on these trains isn't really dangerous or as dangerous as it was a year ago. And we're lucky that we haven't had another major one. But what's interesting is, Republicans control the House, Democrats control the Senate. We have a bipartisan Senate bill that Senator Brown and Senator Vance co-sponsored, and it doesn't really matter. I mean, nothing is moving, and it's just government. I hate to say it, but government just moves at a snail's pace. You get a lot of movement right away when something's fresh in their minds, but then as time progresses, it just the urgency just starts dropping like crazy.
Jesse, there was a huge amount of government response to this accident. Aid went in, inspectors from the federal EPA, the state EPA have gone in. They say the water is safe, the air is safe. Residents still complain about side effects, headaches, rashes, and things like that. The government response still continues, though, right?
Yeah, and I think it's going to be some time before you know any sort of long-term impact from this. Unfortunately, that's what happens. But, to Bob's point, I think there was a lot of attention at the time. There was a lot of pressure on Norfolk Southern, the company that had the trains, and they have made some changes because of that pressure. I think 1 year later, you're seeing a lot more attention. People are kind of like talking about the anniversary. You're going to see President Joe Biden come finally to the location. And so we'll see if this kind of renewed attention on this issue drives any more support.
Desiree, this got a lot of attention a year ago. It's getting a lot of attention now. And a lot of people speculated the reason why it gets a lot of attention is because of the attention and the Donald Trump's stirred up in folks from rural areas who felt like they were sort of disenfranchised or separated from, what people are, from the successes that other people have. How much did Donald Trump and his effect on the vote affect the response to this accident, do you think?
I don't think Donald Trump played any role when we talk about the effects of the accident. If anything, a lot of his policies gutted the opportunity to regulate these train companies, right? And so when we talk about Trump, we're really talking about the detrimental policies implemented under him. And luckily, Sherrod Brown and Amelia Sykes and others have, proposed a bipartisan act that will hopefully get us back on track. And I say that literally and figuratively when we're talking about these trains, because it is a big deal, especially as we talk about expanding Amtrak here in Ohio. People are going to pay more attention in terms of how these big corporations are regulated and governed. And that includes what chemicals and products they're carrying behind our backyards.
What is the legacy of this story, Bob? Because this got a lot of attention, more attention than other industrial accidents have gotten. That, for whatever reason, you could say that the people from East Palestine probably benefited more than, say, people from other accident sites throughout history.
They did. I mean, for now.
For now.
But like Jesse just said, I mean, we don't know long-term effects. I think what this does is gets to people that just view government as not being very effective. When you talk about, well, what has been done in the years since, what legislation's been passed, I mean, this just feeds into, and especially a lot of people in Eastern Ohio, their view of government. It's taken the president over a year to finally get there, to visit the site. It just shows to people, what is government for? What is government capable of accomplishing? And this just feeds into government really can't do much.
Okay. A new poll out shows the benefit of Donald Trump's endorsement in the U.S. Senate race. The Emerson University poll shows the man who got that endorsement, Bernie Moreno, is now tied, basically, with Secretary of State Frank LaRose. Moreno and LaRose are at 22, 21%. Matt Dolan is third at 15%, but still 42% of likely primary voters remain undecided in this race, and that's where money could play a role. And campaign finance reports filed this week indicate that Matt Dolan has the most money to spend in the final weeks of this campaign. Bob Clegg, is the money that Matt Dolan has going to make a difference? Could he close that gap with that money, do you think?
No, I don't think he can. Matt Dolan is the odd man out here. And for whatever reason, I don't think he is anti-Trump, but he's always had this kind of aura around him of anti-Trump. And I think that hurts him in primaries. He ended up third in 2022, but that was like 5 or 6 people. So when you end up third, that's not bad.
He was a close third. He almost got second. Yeah.
Kind of close.
Yeah.
But when it's a 3-person race and you end up third, it's not quite as good. And I'm just afraid between Frank LaRose's name ID being so much better than Matt Dolan's, even though Matt Dolan just ran in 2022, and with the Bernie Moreno endorsement from President Trump helping him, I just think Matt Dolan's going to have a tough road to hoe here.
So is it Bernie Moreno's race to lose, Jesse? He jumped 12 points between the Emerson poll done last winter and this one here done later in the winter.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, when I was watching the NFL championships, every advertisement I saw said Bernie Moreno endorsed by Donald Trump. And I certainly think that's a message that he's trying to get out to Republicans. And it's a message that worked well for J.D. Vance when he got the endorsement last time around.
Democrats figure it's Bernie Moreno, Desiree, and is that the person they want to face in November, that Sherrod Brown wants to face in November?
Well, I can't speak to who they want to face, but I can say Bernie Moreno is clearly looking to be the lead candidate, especially with the Trump endorsement. And just like Jesse, I continue to see the commercials too. That said, Sherrod Brown is still very popular and very strong. And I've spoken to Republicans and independents and, of course, Democrats, and they all like Sherrod Brown because he has name ID and he has a track record. He's been out there working for the average Joe, and I think that's going to go a long way when we talk about, who understands working class and regular people and who's a mega billionaire backed by another mega billionaire.
A lot of people, Bob, equate Bernie Moreno to J.D. Vance. J.D. Vance won, but J.D. Vance ran against Tim Ryan. It was an open seat, so Tim Ryan was not a 3-term incumbent.
Sure.
Sherrod Brown has got a ton of money. No primary opponent.
Well, okay, Mike, first off, I'm the only campaign manager that ever managed a campaign that beat Sherrod Brown. So I know personally he's
Which race was
beatable. That was Bob Taft, Secretary of State, 1990.
Right.
So, I know he's beatable. Here's the problem that Sherrod has. Sherrod has not run in the newly aligned Ohio, where he always could rely, and he always has, carried Mahoning County, Trumbull County, traditional Democrat counties. He's not going to carry those anymore. And the other,
he ran in 2018 after Trump won.
Yeah, but he had an opponent that spent no money. That's not happening this time. This is a targeted race. It wasn't then. The other problem he's got is that poll that came out that showed his head-to-heads, where he's winning by 1 or 2. It also showed President Trump beating Joe Biden by 11 points here in Ohio. And that Biden anchor is going to just hold him down. Tim Ryan outspent J.D. Vance 4-1 in 2022 and lost by 7 points. Sherrod Brown's going to spend probably even more than that. But the problem he's going to have is Joe Biden. He's never run for re-election or election in Ohio where the top of the ticket is winning by 10 or 11 points.
And Jesse, in his first ad out, he doesn't specifically say he opposed Joe Biden, but the analysts are saying he's talking about how he fought Joe Biden on issues about steel and things like that. And he's trying to be the independent in this messaging.
Yeah, I mean, Sherrod Brown is going to try to draw a bit of a distinction from Joe Biden, but he has supported a lot of the same policies. They have similar positions on things, so that will be hard to do.
So how does he do that, Desiree? How does he get a split ticket if people vote for Trump but also vote for Sherrod Brown?
Well, I definitely think that can happen. And again, I think it's because of his popularity, his name recognition, and he's been doing the work. Look, when we talk to people who say, I don't like Joe Biden, I'm a Democrat, or I used to be a Democrat, but I like Sherrod. Okay, why? And it's because they can point to exact achievements that they feel that Sherrod Brown has done or has delivered for them. So what Sherrod Brown's team will have to do is to continue to talk about the wins from his perspective, what he's done in the Senate, the child tax credit, right, and extending that. Everything he's been fighting for that, will be different from the presidential message, because Joe Biden's message will be more of a national campaign, right? They're going to have the same message in probably most of the swing states. Sherrod Brown's message is going to be Ohio specific. This is what I've done for you.
Okay. State lawmakers continue to take aim at regulating thought on Ohio's public college campuses as part of the process of evaluating and approving state money for construction projects. State lawmakers want college presidents to account for the money they spend on diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. DEI programs increased after the 2020 murder of George Floyd focused attention on racial issues. Still before lawmakers is another bill that would ban DEI programs on college campuses. Supporters of the measures complain that college campuses have become too liberal and professors and administrators stifle conservative speech. Jesse Bowman, how unusual is it for a non-capital reason to be inserted into the capital budget process? It's usually whether you need the building or not, and do you have the matching money? This is often a tangent.
Yeah, I'd say it's atypical for sure. There's a lot of things that can get added to the capital budget. We talked about school bus safety might find a way into it somehow this year, but this is more bringing college professors and university presidents in and asking them how are they spending their money, and is it going to some of these programs that you mentioned?
Bob, are they hoping for a moment at the State House like at the Capitol where the president of Brown and Harvard were there and they can pin him down? Is that what they're hoping for here?
I think the presidents of our Ohio universities are a little smarter than those people, so I don't think that's going to happen. But Mike, it makes perfect sense to put it in the capital budget, because when you look at state funding of universities in this day and age, that's where the bulk of the funding goes through now. It's not like they're getting a lot of money through the actual budget process, line items for universities. And I think this is the problem that these universities have is if you're taking state money, then you gotta have to play by whatever rules the state of Ohio gives you. And it's just something they have to either, man up to or just, not take the money.
Could colleges and universities do more to allow for the expression or the highlighting of conservative speech on campus? Because a lot of campus speech it leans left, but there are conservatives on campus, and should they do more to amplify those voices to sort of tamp down this criticism?
So I went to Xavier for undergrad, and I know that's private, but when I was in school, Ann Coulter came, right, to speak to us. I don't think we live in a state or an environment where people are stifled in terms of their political opinions and beliefs. What we're seeing happening, and this is happening in state legislatures across the country, they are trying to ban diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. That includes banning African American studies, women's studies, gender studies, black sororities and fraternities. For me, as a Black woman, when I look at these policies and how gun-ho they are on making sure they pass, it just seems like an agenda led by Republicans and extreme conservatives in the name of culture wars for some sort of later long-term victory to stifle the progress of people of color in this country.
Bob, is that what they're trying to do? Or are they trying to end these programs, DEI programs, altogether?
No, what they're trying to do is make sure that they don't overrule everything else going on in the university. We now have hires that are taking place based on, DEI things, which, you know what? You got to hire the best person, no matter their sex, no matter their color, no matter their religion. You hire the best person. I don't know how that all of a sudden went away. Why is that a bad thing? I mean, why is it bad not to hire the best person possible? Why do we have to put a lot of, okay, this person's got to be female, this person's got to be a person of color? Why do we put those kind of constraints on what we're hiring and what we're teaching in universities? Why can't we
I don't think that's happening. I mean, name a person who you feel like was hired based on their race. Oftentimes, these people are extremely qualified. And when we look at hiring across the country, be it C-suites and executives, all the way down
We
to
had a
entry
president of the
level.
United States that hired a vice president based on her gender and her race.
She was a U.S. senator.
Yeah, I'm
She
not
was an
saying
attorney
whether I'm
general.
not saying whether she was
And she was
qualified or not, and we can argue
she was
that.
extremely qualified
But why
and a
should we
candidate.
be putting ourselves in these self-imposed blocks when we're picking someone or deciding on what kind of things we're going to teach? We have to put a block around it by either saying a certain gender, a certain sexual preference, a certain color. Why do we put that
Real quick,
box
Desiree,
around
then we got to
us?
get going.
Okay, we do not do that. And I think we have to really pay attention to equity and the disparate effects and impacts of not including an inclusionary policy when we're looking at hiring.
All right, let's get to our final off-the-record parting shots. And Desiree, you're up first.
Yeah, the Secretary of Health and Human Services sent a letter to Governor DeWine to update Medicaid enrollment after 86,000 Ohio children lost their Medicaid or CHIP coverage in 2023. So I'm curious to see how that moves through the legislature in the coming year ahead, especially since the trans bill has been something that involves children.
Bob.
Okay. I'd like to note the passing of former Senate President Stan Aronoff. I worked for Senator Aronoff 30 years ago when he was Senate President, and he always had the best interest of Ohioans and Ohio in his heart, and especially with the arts community. He was a big arts supporter.
And Jesse.
There was an Ohio Supreme Court ruling on a legislative candidate up in northern Ohio who had a prior felony conviction but is now able to run again. So we'll see the impact of that going forward.
All right. Of course, it's Groundhog Day on Friday, and Buckeye Chuck did not see his shadow. So that means spring arrives early. But with this caveat, Buckeye Chuck is not his real name. Apparently, his name is Murray. So never trust a groundhog with two first names. See what that's worth. That's Columbus on the Record for this week. Continue the conversation on Facebook. Watch us anytime at our website, WOSU.org, YouTube, and the PBS video app. For our crew and panel, I'm Mike Thompson. Have a good week.